Hi there, welcome to the Raising Musos podcast, where we share music education tips to help parents support their child's musical journey. If this is the first time you're tuning in to Raising Musos, my name is Eliza Burgo. I actually run a music school in Joondalup, Western Australia. And so I started this podcast to help parents because I noticed that a lot of parents don't really know all that much about music education, and so I wanted to create a free resource for parents. So that's what Raising Musos podcast is for. I am looking forward to sharing a new episode with you, and today's topic is group versus private lessons. Which is better? This is, probably quite a heated discussion in the music education field. I think traditionally, when you learn an instrument, it's private tuition. That's what most people think about, I think. But that said, group lessons have become more and more popular, at least from the conversations that I have with other music school owners. There are a lot of benefits to learning an instrument in a group setting as opposed to the traditional one-to-one way. So that's what we're going to be comparing today, just the advantages and the disadvantages of private lessons and group lessons. So if you have been thinking of enrolling your child for music lessons and you're not quite sure whether to enroll them for group lessons or private lessons, then I hope this episode will just help you out with making a decision, so that you feel a bit more informed, and so that you can actually consider in greater detail, like, what is it you're hoping for your child to get out of learning music, because they will get different things whether they are taught one-to-one or in a group setting. Phew! So, wow, that was the intro. So I am going to start by talking about group lessons. So of course, group lessons, it means there would be multiple students during the same lesson. And look, different music schools and different tutor will group students based on different factors. So students could be grouped in terms of their age. So maybe it would be a group class for 8 to 9-year-olds, or another class for 10 to 12-year-olds. Or perhaps those students would be grouped in terms of their experience and their playing level. So maybe there would be a class for grade 2s, a class for grade 3s. So the first thing to know here is, how are the students grouped together? At my music school, I've started running group guitar classes, and I don't know if I found the perfect way of grouping students. At the moment, I just do it by age, and of course, then people join the class if they are available at the time of the class, and if they're not available, then they can't join. But grouping students by age, I think, is it's quite clever, because children have different developmental stages, and so of course, the focus and the ability to learn and retain and apply new skills and information will be very, very different between a 6-year-old and a teenager. And so I think if students are grouped by age, then they feel that they can really relate a lot better to their peers, and hopefully all the students can progress more or less at the same level because they have the same or a similar mental capacity. Now that said, of course, and so this is one of the disadvantages, which I will return to a bit later, but of course, in a group lesson setting, you might have someone who's maybe very lazy, they don't practice, or maybe they just, don't have as much talent, whatever that means. And so then it's just a matter of whether the class is suitable for different levels. Because, in a group, even though there might be similarities in the development stage of the children, there will always be variation within that. Cool. So that's the first thing, how students are grouped. And I do believe that most tutors and music schools would just group students by age because of that development reason that I just mentioned. So as students are grouped together and learn in a group setting, probably the biggest advantage or benefit of learning in a group lesson setting is simply the social element of it. So for instance, in a group lesson setting, there is more opportunity for peer support. So students learn together first of all, but they can also learn from each other. So if a student is struggling, then maybe another student can help them out. And so they learn from each other, and so that can also develop some leadership skills in some students. And it's quite enjoyable and fun to learn with others, just like at school, they probably enjoy learning maths when they have their friends there, right? More than they would enjoy maths by themselves. So it's just an enjoyable experience because they get to make connections and make friends, and then they can receive and also provide peer support. Learning in a group setting also encourages accountability because students will see who is making progress, and so that will make them want to progress at the same pace so that they can keep up. And so there's an element there where the group class is always progress made because there is a bit of peer pressure and accountability to improve their skills so that they are not left behind and feeling humiliated and embarrassed. So there is a greater incentive in a group setting for them to practice. And we all know that practice is always a challenging part of music lessons for almost every family that I speak to. So another benefit of group lessons, I already mentioned that, but teamwork and leadership skills. So that could be providing peer support to others, develops their leadership skill, their compassion because they're helping someone out. But also playing music all together. So of course, in a group setting, you have so many opportunities to just jam together and make music all at the same time. So playing in an ensemble teaches cooperation, listening skills and timing. So we just learn to really listen to what everyone is doing, and we figure out where it is that we fit in the song, whether we're the main part or maybe the accompaniment part. And so we just learn to respect what everyone else is doing. So it has great just human playing in an ensemble teaches great human skills like respect and listening, compassion, and cooperation as well, because you're all working together to achieve a song. So it's in an ensemble, what's it called? The sum is greater than the parts. I hope that makes sense. Learning in a group is really interactive. So we can do more games because we have more players. So music games can be a lot of fun, making the lesson like really engaging for students. As I mentioned, they can do ensemble work by playing a song together. And then collaboration. So when a student is struggling, can anyone else in the group help out? And when you make music with other people, it can be a really impactful experience. And it's a great way of creating friendship and connection with others. So that's something else that a group lesson provides, is just opportunity for human connection with a number of people. And it creates these really awesome memories. I know that if I look back at my music memories, you know, I love playing music with my husband. So again, that's in an ensemble, in a group setting. When I was in high school, I sang in 3 different choirs, and I just really loved doing that. I love singing in choirs. I still sing in choirs to this day. And just the memories that you make making music with others is really amazing. So there you go. So that was the social part of group music lessons. It provides peer support, accountability, develops teamwork, leadership skills. It's an interactive environment for learning, and it creates these awesome memories that can really last a lifetime. Another category of advantages for group lessons is just musical growth. So learning in a group setting is probably a better way of learning ear training skills as opposed to in a private group lesson setting. So because again, if you're playing in an ensemble, you just have to listen so much more than when you're just playing by yourself, right? So you have to listen to your timing, the rhythm, your tuning, you know, the balance between all the instruments. So there is I suppose a greater element of oral and listening skills in a group lesson setting. So if that's the kind of thing that you're looking for, is just to develop a strong like ear and a good sense of pulse and playing in time so you can play with others, then a group lesson is amazing for that. And sort of related to that, music lessons in a group enhance listening skills. So, you know, we have to listen to the instructor carefully, and we also have to listen to each other. So listening skills is important. Another musical skill that will develop more in group lesson settings is performance skills, performance confidence. Because you are literally playing your instrument in front of the group. It sort of feels like a performance. You might even have to just play a part by yourself while everyone else is listening. So basically the group lesson provides a very casual and relaxed atmosphere to practice performing, and that can be a great way of preparing for more serious performances. And so then another musical benefit to group lessons is basically playing music together. Okay, and so that those benefits would be, you know, social and emotional well-being, because we are sharing our activity with others. As I said, it builds teamwork because we realize that everyone is important and we're not better or more important than anyone. Attention to detail, being able to maintain your own part in an ensemble piece. You have to follow a leader. Sometimes you might even have to be the leader. And so there's all these awesome musical benefits to learning music, if I can talk today, to learning music in a group. And then finally, the other advantage, I suppose, of the other category of advantage of group lessons is simply that it's generally a lot cheaper than private lessons. And I would say that because there is such a social and quite fun element to group lessons, I do think that they are more appropriate for like very, very young children who might not be quite ready for the intensity of private lessons. So, or even it's a group lesson setting would be more appropriate for children who might just want to have fun with music, but not necessarily want to take it too seriously. Group lessons provide the perfect balance of like learning some skills, but also having fun and just playing music, right? So these are some of the advantages of group lessons. I'm sorry if this sounded a little bit like unstructured. I did have like dot points and stuff, and I thought what I had written was organized. But now that I've spoken it out, it feels like it was all a bit messy. But now let's look at the disadvantages of group lessons. And really, I could only sort of think of 2 or 3. So probably the first disadvantage is that the instruction would be more general and so less in depth, because the teacher has to cater to all these different students and they might have like different skill levels. So they can't really go very deep with a student and really fix a lot of things. So the teaching might be a little bit more superficial and so not go in as much detail as you can go in a private lesson setting. And so again, the teaching in a group lesson might be a little bit more general as opposed to very specific to the student. But this might depend how many students are in the class and how long the class is as well. Another disadvantage is there is more temptation to lose focus because there's all these people, and so the children might get distracted, really. So that's something else to consider. And I had just thought of another one, but I cannot remember what it is. Yeah, never mind. I don't remember what it is. Okay, so that's my overview of group lessons. There's loads of benefits to them. So they can be really, really great fun for kids. So that's what I would recommend, is if your kid isn't too serious about learning music, they just want to have fun, play music, get slightly better at their instrument, or maybe they're like very young so they have trouble like focusing, then I would recommend group lessons. So now I'm going to move on to private lessons. So in a private lesson, what that really means is that you have a single student with a single teacher. So it's one-to-one. And so the argument for why private lessons are like really good is that it allows for a personalized learning experience. So the teacher can look at the student, ask them what they want to do, ask them what they're working on, figure out what is it they're struggling with, and really decide what to do to help out the student and to support the student in reaching their goals. And so the way one student is taught will be different across like all students, basically, because it's just one-to-one. So that's really the main advantage. So whereas group lessons, it was more general teaching, and private lessons, it's more in-depth and it's specific to the student. Now, another advantage of private lessons is the student receives more attention, obviously, because the teacher doesn't have to divide their attention between multiple students. So the teacher's attention should be completely on the same student all the way through the lesson. And then, as I said, because the teaching of the one-to-one lesson is specific to the student, that means we can really focus on specific skills. And so the skills that the students end up working on will be different depending on what they are most struggling with or what they most want to achieve. So one student could be they're really struggling with their hand alignment, whereas another student could be struggling with rhythm. Whereas in a group lesson setting, you wouldn't really be able to change the teaching approach depending on what the kids are struggling with during the class. You sort of just have to give general tips. And so because in the one-to-one setting, it's so personalized and so specific to the student, you would expect that the student just progresses faster because they are receiving literally the advice that they need for their particular issue that they're struggling with. So whereas in a group lesson setting, I talked about how distracting it can be because there's just a lot of more people to talk to and stuff like that. In the one-to-one lesson setting, there are obviously fewer distractions. First of all, the only person the student can talk to is the teacher. And so whether the student will want to talk to their teacher, will depend on the student. But generally speaking, there would be fewer distractions, so we might get through more content in a private lesson setting as opposed to during a group lesson setting, because we can just focus on what is at hand and we don't have anyone to distract us. So basically very productive lessons. Sorry for the silence. I think it just started pouring and I just got distracted. So another advantage of private lessons is that we have opportunities for in-depth exploration. So in a private lesson, we can help the student delve in deeper into areas of particular interest. Because the curriculum is so flexible in a private lesson, we can really just do whatever the student wants. I mean, obviously, probably the teacher would have some kind of idea and curriculum in mind, but we can really adapt our curriculum to what the student wants to focus on at a particular point in time. So whether that's, maybe they want to start learning a new style of music, maybe they want to learn how to compose or how to improvise, or maybe do a bit more music theory, we can always adapt the plan and the curriculum of each lesson to reflect what the student is working on. So there's quite a lot of flexibility to try different things, whereas in the group lesson setting, we might have a more fixed curriculum that we want to get through. And then another advantage of private lessons is it can, increase the students' self-esteem and confidence, because especially with students maybe who are a little bit more shy, introverted, who tend not to speak up in a group lesson setting, the private lesson is basically the space where they are going to feel safe to ask questions and to make mistakes, because there is no one who's gonna sort of criticize them or laugh at them. So private lessons can be really good for nurturing confidence in, I would say, shy and hesitant children. But of course, private lessons do have a couple of disadvantages as well. So because private lessons students are always basically playing by themselves, there isn't as many opportunities for them to play with others or to perform. So there's not that many opportunities to actually apply what they learn during a lesson. So that can be a little bit limiting for them. And because they don't have anyone to compare themselves to, then they might not feel any pressure to practice or get better, so they lack motivation. They might lack motivation to practice. And it does mean that they become they are responsible for doing their own practice. There is no external pressure on them to practice like they would in a group lesson. When they see everyone has practiced except them, that would maybe make them want to practice. But in a private lesson setting, they cannot compare themselves to anyone. Of course, in a private lesson setting, there is no social element like in a group lesson setting. So there is no, maybe there is a bit of a lack of community and a lack of social interaction. And private lessons do tend to be more expensive because of the specific curriculum. So the teacher has to put in more work to prepare. And of course, it does mean that the teacher has to have more students to make the same amount of money that they would in a group lesson, which is why private lessons are more expensive. Phew! So that wraps up our discussion on group versus private lessons. And if you are wondering what option you should pick for your child, sort of already touched on it, right? But it will definitely depend on a lot of factors. So the first factor would be the age of your child. If they are very young, I would say under the age of maybe 8 or 9, I would think that group lessons would be more appropriate, because it will give them an introduction to music, but in a way that's going to feel really fun and hopefully not too hard for them and not too scary either. So that will mean that their first experience with music is a positive one, which is what we want, because then once they decide to be more serious about music, then they can switch to private lessons and really start to develop specific playing skills. I would also recommend group lessons for students who maybe are a little bit older and who don't know yet how serious they are going to be about music. And maybe they just want music to be like a fun hobby that they do occasionally. So again, if that's the case, they just want a non-serious learning environment. So group lessons fulfills that really well. Private lessons, I would recommend to students who are just very passionate about music, like they just know it's what they want to do. And I've met students like that. They're very interested, and they feel like the group lessons might slow them down. I would also recommend it to students who would just feel a little bit uncomfortable in a group. So that would be like their personality. And I would also encourage private lessons when parents really want to see results with their child's music learning. And of course, the main other factor to consider is simply the cost, and that will depend on your individual budget. All right, so that's me done with this episode. I hope it made sense. Yeah, I'm really sorry if it just turned out not as structured as I thought. It's actually surprisingly hard sometimes to put a podcast episode together. But you know, I attempted it. I tried to cover the advantages and the disadvantages of group and private lessons. And if this episode has helped you, first of all, I would love to know what kind of decision you made regarding your child's enrollment with music. If you decided after listening to this episode that group lessons or private lessons would be most appropriate for them, I would love to hear about it. And if you've had experience as a child learning music in a group or privately, I would love to know like what you thought and what the differences were. So if you want to get in touch, send me a message on Instagram. My handle is @musicmakersacademy. You can leave a comment on YouTube, or you can send me an email at hello@musicmakersacademy.com.au. Okay, so I will speak to you in the future, the next episode. Bye!